Hello, I'm David Land, and welcome to the IndyCar Red Pill, where we talk about IndyCar racing, no punches pulled, and no filter. Today we are talking about the Barber race, the Honda Indy Barber Grand Prix, or whatever they call this race. There was a robot that gave the command to start engines, and it was totally fake news. It was so fake, so fake.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
You know how I could tell it was fake? Well, first of all, there was like a weird, a menagerie of people behind that was like, they were wearing like really weird Honda things, and they were all like smiling, like. The real tip-off that the Honda robot didn't actually give the command to start the engines, or at least not. It didn't give the command when the engines were actually fired. It was a taped segment, is what I'm trying to say. And the reason you could tell that was because when the TV switched between the robot talking and the actual cars on the track, like the frame rate changed on the broadcast. I don't know if I was the only one that noticed this, but the robot was fake news. Hashtag Asimo is fake news.
Greetings, I am the Asimo 4000.
So before the green flag even comes out, Marco Andretti's nightmare 2017 season continues when his car would not shift gears. There was some gearbox problem. He was in the pits before the green flag even came out, after being hyped by NBC Sports as the fastest man in the warm-up. Once again, we don't get to see any results or even any real change, or even to see kind of where Brian Herta's guidance is taking Marco Andretti, because frankly the cars aren't lasting even very long. The same thing happened at Long Beach, where he was out very, very early on in the race, and we just never got to see what he was capable of. Maybe at Phoenix, we'll see. So the green flag is out, and pole sitter Will Power, as he usually does when he's on the pole, checks out. But it's not what Will Power was doing, because frankly, who cares? The guy who leads at the beginning of IndyCar races rarely wins these days, because there was some absolutely incredible racing behind Will Power. Banging wheels was RHR, Ryan Hunter-Reay, and James Hinchcliffe, the Long Beach winner. Debris flying everywhere, this time not actually caused by the bumpers, but more just because the Hondas, I guess, kind of had fragile end plates. Parts were flying back, actually hitting Ed Jones' car, and Sebastian Bourdais had to do some evasive action to miss the flying debris. And definitely debris is a problem. It's probably been a bit exacerbated by the aero kits, but honestly, when you're going to have contact in open wheel cars, you're usually going to have debris. So it's just going to be people who think that the 2018 car is going to absolutely minimize debris. I don't think that's going to happen. You're going to still see debris flying when the cars run into each other in 2018, but I do think it's going to be a little bit reduced from what we're seeing now, where there's just, it seems like a confetti of debris happens when you just get the slightest bit of side-by-side contact. All that amazing slicing and dicing which caused that debris also brought out a debris yellow. And yes, I'm about to go there. Isn't it nice when they show the debris on the TV when a debris yellow comes out? I'm sorry. I had to do it. Please, I beg your forgiveness. I beg your forgiveness, NASCAR on Reddit. So when the race gets back going again, there is one driver that rises to the top as a guy who looks like an absolute contender early on in the race, and that guy is Team Penske's newest weapon, Joseph Newgarden, in the number 2 car, sponsored by Fitzgerald. Some big truck part company that just happened to come out of nowhere. My friend Sam on Twitter compared them to Rachel's potato chips. I wouldn't say that's an unfair comparison. I had never heard of them before that. But regardless, the Fitzgerald glider kit's car was on fire with Joseph Newgarden behind the wheel. He was fighting with Simon Pagenaud, the defending IndyCar champion, banging wheels. And of course, Pagenaud's his teammate, so they were racing fairly fair, but it was an intense fight. Newgarden was able to get through there, and man, he was looking really good. His team chose an alternate strategy, going with the black primary tires rather than the softer alternate red tires at the beginning of the race, and that strategy was probably the best in terms of the whole race because his car just didn't fall off in that first stint. He was able to pick up several positions, but I think his car was very strong throughout the entire day, as we would see later. Another guy who was ultra fast, and I want to give an early shout out to, is Alexander Rossi. Now, granted, under the first yellow, he came into the pits and made a pit stop to gain some fuel mileage over the guys in the front of the pack. But once he got up to about 7th place, when the cycle of pit stops finally made it all the way around to where everybody was on the same strategy again, Rossi was running a very strong 7th place and actually starting to make moves on people. And he had come from the 18th starting position. And I think I said in the Long Beach review that Alexander Rossi is absolutely for real this year, folks. People have doubted him for whatever reason. I think it's because a lot of people feel that he lucked into the Indy 500 win. And while that may be the case, again, he was very fast there. He showed incredible pace at Long Beach, honestly, race-winning pace, had his engine not blown up. And once again here at Barber, he took a bad starting position, drove to the front, ended up finishing 5th. I mean, what a fantastic drive from Alexander Rossi. And again, he's a guy to watch. I'm telling you guys, he is going to be very, very good later on this season. I bet he'll take at least one win. Mid part of the race was where NBC Sports kind of took a break, kind of Long Beach 2008 style, where we cut to a driver in the booth that was not a part of the race going on the track. And of course, that was because two-time world driving champion Fernando Alonso had jumped into the booth to talk to NBC Sports commentators Townsend Bell, Paul Tracy, and Lee Diffie. And while I think some people would kind of be annoyed that the broadcast for about 10-15 minutes was hijacked by Fernando Alonso, I think it was a really interesting segment, certainly because we finally got to see Fernando Alonso kind of in this IndyCar element. We obviously saw him at a press conference earlier today, or at least earlier on the day that I'm filming this, the day of the race, but I think Fernando is really looks to be really enjoying IndyCar racing and really liking what he's seeing in Barber. The kind of funny thing was, as they were interviewing Fernando Alonso the whole time, you were seeing passes, overtakes, cars slicing in and out of traffic, and I'm sitting here thinking, this is a guy that comes from Formula One, and let's face it, Formula One needs all the help they can get when it comes to passing. You've got, now obviously IndyCar still has things like push to pass and alternate tires and whatnot, but compared to what Formula One has in terms of their attempts to create passing, IndyCar's in a completely different league, and IndyCar's actually succeeded in creating those overtakes. So while Fernando Alonso was sitting in the booth, it was just a very interesting contrast to see him speaking about the great competition, great drivers, great teams in IndyCar, and them actually backing that up on track. But probably bar none, the best part of the Alonso segment was the point where Lee Diffie asked the question, what could Paul Tracy and Townsend Bell tell Fernando Alonso about racing in the Indianapolis 500? And then Lee Diffie stepped aside, an incredible move by him because it created some very compelling TV. The fact that we could hear Paul Tracy and Townsend Bell both be able to give Fernando Alonso all this great information that generally fans are not privy to. The comment that Townsend Bell made about preparing for racing at Indianapolis in an IndyCar modern day is more like preparing to drive planes rather than race cars. And then him making the joke at the end that it's more that within 10 laps to go it becomes a car race rather than an airplane race again. And Fernando Alonso's face kind of brightened up during that exchange, and I thought that was just a wonderful insight and wonderful TV. And again, that's something that NBC Sports does so much better. They are able to capture moments like that, capture the passion of the sport, and capture moments that again, as racing fans, we rarely get to see unless you're a driver who gets to have a coach or a driver coach or somebody who has been there. You usually don't get to hear that insight. Drivers generally don't give away secrets like that for free over the air, even if they're working for a broadcast. But so to hear Paul Tracy and Townsend Bell give that advice to Fernando Alonso was a special treat, and I really appreciated it. So back to the race, and as I said, it's an absolute cracker. Will Power, Joseph Newgarden, and Scott Dixon are locked in a three-way battle for the lead. 2 Chevys and a Honda. This is the best competition we've seen between Chevy and Honda all year long. And as they hit lap traffic, the gaps got even closer. Then the seminal moment of the race, Spencer Pigot goes off in the hairpin. We never got a replay of it. It was unclear whether he got spun, had some kind of mechanical difficulty. He was running in 10th place. Spiggy was having a great run, and he would have been a guy that I would have shouted out at the end of the day had he not spun. But he goes a lap down under the yellow, and it packs up the field as everybody but Charlie Kimball comes into the pits. And the reason that's important is because Charlie Kimball and Will Power had a bit of an altercation apparently on the Friday here at Barber while Charlie was walking his pooch. But anyway, apparently the altercation got pretty heated, probably more Will Power on Will Power's side than Charlie Kimball's side, but who knows, maybe Charlie Kimball is like a big-time fighter that we don't know about. He doesn't really seem like the type that would get into fights, but you know, you never know. I mean, Will Power, we know Will Power's temperament when it comes to things like that. But anyway, as they come off of the pits, it sets up what was almost an incredibly interesting situation where Charlie Kimball was leading the race and Will Power was second. The only thing that saved us was, of course, Spiggy, who stayed out during that yellow. So Spiggy was in between Kimball and Power, so we never really got to see them on track fight for the lead. Kind of a shame, but maybe it was for the best because there were 2 race cars that didn't end up wrecked. So on the aforementioned restart, the move of the day happens where Joseph Newgarden slices underneath of Scott Dixon, and Dixon even later admitted that Newgarden kind of caught him there as Newgarden sliced to the inside, kind of moved out to the outside of the track, perfectly clean move. It wasn't dirty or in any way, but Newgarden takes second place, and that would be very significant because Will Power, bad luck Will, maybe I don't know who's worse, whose luck is worse, Marco's or Will Power's, because at least Will Power gets up to the front, and then his luck goes south. Marco, he never has a chance to begin with, unfortunately. His car always seems to fail before the race. But anyway, Will Power's right rear tire starts to go flat. The NBC Sports guys are screaming and railing that Will needs to stay out, not go in the pits because he's leading the race. But Will Power eventually heeds to the call, the pleading of his crew that this tire is going down and you need to get in the pits. So Power cedes the lead to Joseph Newgarden, and that sets up a duel maybe we'll talk about in a very long time as kind of one of those things where we saw the old generation versus the new generation, because it was Scott Dixon chasing down Joseph Newgarden. And I think the story will be told that for the last 15 laps of the race, Joseph Newgarden was able to hold off Scott Dixon, indeed, this generation's strongest driver for 15 laps at one of the toughest road courses in the country. 15 laps, Joseph Newgarden held the lead, managed his push to pass, managed Dixon, and the fact that Dixon had about double the push to pass time that Newgarden had. Newgarden maintained his pace, maintained his lead, and was able to take his first victory for Team Penske in only his 3rd race. And obviously, to put that achievement into perspective, Simon Pagenaud, the current reigning IndyCar Series champion, was winless in his first season with Team Penske. So the fact that Joseph Newgarden has gone to victory lane this early speaks volumes, because you always hear drivers say how difficult it is to win in IndyCar racing these days. There's so many people who are competitive. There's so many people who can win, especially when you're at Team Penske, and 3 of those other drivers in that team are very capable and are very much contenders week in, week out to take victories. So obviously, as a confidence boost, it's huge for Newgarden. Now, are we going to see a championship run from him, or are the wheels going to fall off? It's hard to say at this point, but as they pointed out on NBC Sports, a couple of very strong tracks for Joseph are coming up next. You've got Phoenix, where we know the Chevy package is maybe the better one, certainly on the short ovals. And obviously Penske was very strong there last year. They didn't actually get the win. Dixon took it, but this year Dixon's in a Honda, not in a Chevy. So you would imagine that the battle for Phoenix is going to be between the Ed Carpenter racing cars of, we assume, J.R. Hildebrand, though he's injured at the moment, and Ed Carpenter, and then the 4 Penske. So maybe a 6-car battle there. You could probably throw Dixon in the mix, even though he's in a Honda. Maybe Marco Andretti could shine there, or Ryan Hunter-Reay. He seems to be the oval meister these days. But you'd think that Joseph's going to be pretty good at Phoenix. And then you get to Indianapolis, where he finished 3rd last year. I actually picked him to win last year in the 500. He very nearly did. Unfortunately, he got outdueled by Carlos Munoz and outfueled by Alexander Rossi. But having a Penske chassis at his, well, not really a chassis, but his a Penske team behind him, I think Joseph could really, really shine at Indianapolis. So we could see a very strong string of races for Joseph Newgarden. It's going to be very interesting to see down the line for this championship how Joseph Newgarden's going to do. Sebastian Bourdais, still the points leader after 3 races. That's pretty crazy to think about. You just got to wonder, is he going to be in contention as we get down the stretch past Indianapolis? Obviously, Indianapolis is going to be a huge month. We're not really going to be thinking much about the point standings during that month. It's going to be all about the Indianapolis 500 win, but who knows where it's going to be. It's going to be very interesting to see where Bourdais starts stacking up on the oval tracks, and we're going to see that at Phoenix and at Indianapolis. But obviously, my driver of the day, I mentioned him earlier, has to go to Alexander Rossi. I think he drove an absolutely fantastic race considering the circumstances, driving up from 18th to 5th. I think that has to be my driver of the day. It'll be very interesting to see how he does at Phoenix. We could see him very strong. I know he had a crash there in the test, but he may have gotten that out of his system, and we might see a very strong run from Alexander Rossi at Phoenix. And obviously, when we get to Indianapolis, he was strong in the Grand Prix of Indianapolis last year, and obviously he won the 500 last year. So I think we'll see some strong things out of Alexander Rossi in the next few races. This season is going to be very, very interesting. So I'm glad to have you guys along here for the IndyCar Red Pill. And Indianapolis 500 month is fast approaching, where we're going to have an entire month on this channel devoted to IndyCar racing coverage. So those of you who like this video will probably like Indy 500 month. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Leave a like on this video if you enjoy the IndyCar Red Pill. Leave a comment with your thoughts down below. That's what it's for. Love the discussion. That's what this series is for. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.